With the release of Aquaman 2, or Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and the coming of the new year, 2023 is officially done and all of its comic book movies have been released. How do they stack up against one another? Well, we're about to find out. Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host, Brett Murphy, and for today's video I have a brand new ranking for you all, as I am going to be ranking every 2023 comic book movie. So by my count, there were 11 comic book movies released this past year. Some of them are the best that we've ever gotten, and some of them might be considered among the worst. And so in today's video, I'm going to be sharing my own personal ranking with you all. It is my own subjective thoughts, and that is why it is oh so important for you to leave your own ranking down in the comments below. As a final note before we get into the actual ranking itself, I just wanted to let you all know that I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my ranking videos. So if movie rankings are your thing, then be sure to check that out, and I guarantee you'll find something you like. And so without further ado, let's hop right into things. Coming in at number 11 is going to be Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Now, I'm going to preface all of this by saying that I actually didn't dislike any of the comic book movies that dropped this year. There were some that I liked a lot less than others, and there were some that were extremely disappointing to me, but I didn't outright hate anything that released this year. Nevertheless, Shazam! Fury of the Gods is coming in at last place for this list. I think this movie still did do a lot of things right. I think a lot of the action sequences were pretty fun, and the family dynamic is really the saving grace of it all. Jack Dylan Grazer and Rachel Zegler are the stars of this movie. They are probably the main reason that it's worth watching, if you ask me. I don't mind Zachary Levi. I mean, for some reason the entire internet seemed to turn on this guy, but the only issues I found with his performance in this movie is that there was just a clear disconnect between him and Asher Angel playing the younger version of him. Some of the comedy works, some of it doesn't. They somehow managed to mostly waste the villains, and that's pretty mind-boggling when you think of the fact that they got Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu to play the villains. Like, they should have knocked it out of the park. They should have been the shining stars and the main reason to go see this movie, and instead they just kind of putter through generic dialogue and have the typical average run-of-the-mill evil plan. So although yes, I have been pretty critical of this movie and my feelings are quite harsh, I still did find some enjoyment here and there. Coming in at number 10 is going to be Merry Little Batman. And now this is a cute, sweet little animated holiday flick that seems to have been overlooked by most, as quite a few people also just didn't even include it in their comic book movie rankings. Now, for me personally, I didn't love this movie. As a huge Batman fan, I just naturally look forward to anything Batman related, and I think this movie it's cute, it's sweet. Like I said, I just used those descriptors, and those are the main descriptors that I would use for it. I will probably revisit this one come Christmas time next year because it does give me those Christmas vibes, but it's very goofy, and for die-hard Batman fans, this might not quite scratch that itch. I know there are a lot of extremely good animated Batman movies out there that some people are very, very passionate about. This is not going to be one of them. It's very childish, it's very goofy, but it's just light-hearted holiday fun. So if you go into it with the right expectations, I think you will have a good time. It is definitely aimed towards children or parents with little children that will just kind of throw something on, whether as background noise or whatever, during the holidays. For number 9, and this one is likely going to shock quite a few people, but I'm going to be going with The Flash. This might also take the top spot for the most disappointing movie of 2023 for me. I haven't quite decided yet, but look, everything in the build-up to this movie, it was just chaos. You had everything going on with the legal troubles of Ezra Miller, and then you had the studio saying that, like, no, this movie is coming out, it's that good, test audiences, early screenings, it's that good, it's a must-see movie, it's gonna change comic book movies forever, and all this other stuff. So it was very much so a yin and a yang. So I went in with pretty high expectations and I left extremely disappointed. My favorite part of this movie was that middle section when it was just the Barry with Barry stuff. And some of it in there, like, I really like Sasha Calle as Supergirl, and it's a shame that she's not coming back. Michael Keaton's return as Batman, like, to me, I loved seeing Michael Keaton, but when he was Batman, it was so clearly not him. The man is like 70-something years old. It was very CGI'd, and that's where a lot of my gripes come with this movie. The pacing is horrendous. I think the first act is all over the place. The final act couldn't be more ugly and bland, and just, they brought Zod back for absolutely nothing. I genuinely feel like it wasn't even Michael Shannon. It looked like just a CGI, AI, disgusting monster put on the screen, so it doesn't even end up towards the middle. I just end up very mixed on it and very disappointed for what could have been. Number 8 is going to have to be Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Now, I didn't dislike this movie as much as most people did. In fact, I actually kind of liked it. Now, it is far from perfect, but the way I would best describe this movie is it's Marvel doing its best Star Wars impression. Not every joke lands, not every fight scene knocks it out of the park or blows your mind or anything like that, but I did like the main cast as always. Most of the comedy landed, and although I know that Jonathan Majors is in some very hot water at this moment, and it seems to be rightfully so, however, him as Kang in this movie was a force to be reckoned with. Where the issues come in is that a lot of the story is sloppy, the pacing isn't always the best, and the CGI is pretty bad. It's very like Spy Kids 3D level of bad. It almost looks like they just ripped some shots straight out of that movie from 2003 and put it in this movie 20 years later in 2023. Nevertheless, though, I still personally think this is the best Ant-Man movie. It retains much of what I liked about the first two Ant-Man movies, but it changed the setting. It did something different. I just really wish they went all in on that last act, because I left feeling like there was no stakes at all in this movie. Like, nothing happens. It's just the typical hunky-dory Disney ending. No one is killed off. No one is left stranded. There's nothing leading me back to these characters and making me want more from this side of Marvel. So, it has its moments. Again, it's like Marvel doing its best Star Wars impression, and I had fun with it. Now, this one has seen some incredibly mixed reception, and that is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which is going to be my number 7 pick for today. Full disclosure, I am a massive fan of the first Aquaman movie. Like, I flat out love it. That shit is like a 9 out of 10 for me. So, despite the very mixed to downright negative reviews, going into this movie, I was still excited and I was still hopeful. And there are a lot of portions of this movie that deliver. In particular, Momoa and Wilson's dynamic, the Orm-Arthur duo, I thought was exceptional. They played off of each other so perfectly. Their chemistry was spot on, and that is the reason to go see this movie, next to the incredibly well-directed action sequences from James Wan. But here are where the issues come in. The story is a little all over the place, and a lot of that comes down to the editing. It is very clear that this movie was pulled apart and stitched back together over and over again. There are sequences in here that just, you can tell it just wasn't by the same person. I know they're really pushing and saying James Wan did it all. It was just like the standard reshoots and fix-ups and stuff like that. I don't buy it. This movie feels like it could have been 30, 40 minutes longer, and I don't normally say that, but there are just huge, massive jumps. You feel like you're missing so many important pieces, and the CGI is very 50-50. There are at times when I was watching this movie that I was like, this looks spectacular, on par with the original, and then there are moments in here where it just looks unfinished. The jokes were 50-50, some landed, some didn't. A lot of the dialogue was kind of garbage, not gonna lie. It was very goofy, generic dialogue for a lot of it. This movie, I can just best describe it as like 50-50, and that's why it lands very close to the middle of this list. There were elements in here that I loved and that worked really well for me, and then there are elements in here that I was just like, come on guys, seriously? It doesn't reach the heights of the original, and it certainly wasn't the big epic swan song for the DCEU that I was personally hoping for. Number 6, and arguably the most underrated comic book movie from this year, is Blue Beetle. Now, I know what you're gonna say, and a lot of people didn't care much for this movie. It felt very been there, done that. There are major echoes of like the first Iron Man movie in here. It's got extremely forgettable villains, but the rest is what I loved. I loved our main character. I love Blue Beetle as a character. I was so excited to see this character in live action, one of my all-time favorite DC characters. But the driving force behind this movie, and probably my favorite aspect, as you can probably tell by now, I'm a huge sucker for solid family elements. I am a family man through and through, and I bought into the relationships in this movie. They felt so genuine, so authentic, and that's what made me love this movie. On top of some unbelievably fun action sequences, I don't think they took full advantage of Blue Beetle's wide range of powers and abilities, but there are some great sequences in here that I still think of all of these months later. And so I think it's very underrated. I think a lot of people slept on this movie. It didn't do very well at the box office. The reviews were very middling, but I had a blast, and it's one that I am certainly going to be revisiting time and time again. I truly think it's one of the best that the DCEU has to offer. See, if there are people out there who take others' opinions very seriously, there's a good chance they would have already hit that dislike button, and that's totally cool. Do whatever you feel. But if they haven't already, there's a good chance they probably are going to now. And if that's you, I hate to break it to you, but number 5 for me is going to be The Marvels. The primary reason for this is the trio of leads. I adore Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. Aman Vellani was born to play Kamala Khan, and I love Teyonah Parris as Monica Rambeau. I love the whole swapping places thing and how they learn to use that to their advantage. Yes, there are some goofy things in here. Yes, the villain is completely forgettable, but I think some people are really stretching it here when they're saying that it's like the worst villain in the MCU or the most forgettable villain in the MCU. I think that they're just forgetting, or they have already wiped some of the other villains out of their minds, because she is very far from the worst or most forgettable villain. There are far worse out there. But yeah, I thought this movie was fun. It was just good old-fashioned, light-hearted fun. I feel like a lot of people who just went in on this movie either are the people that use woke for everything they dislike, or just kind of forgot how to have fun. Like, don't get me wrong, this is definitely ending up towards the bottom of the MCU. Maybe if I'm feeling super generous, up towards the middle, like a little bit. But I just personally feel like some people were far too harsh on this movie. A lot of the comedy worked for me. Again, the action, there was a ton of fun to be had there. Though the story was fairly weak and the villain very forgettable, I enjoyed myself. I bet you never thought that you'd see the day where David Fincher, who has spoken out many times against franchise movies, directs a comic book movie, because for those of you who didn't know, his most recent work, The Killer, was based on a comic book. This Netflix movie starring Michael Fassbender had some extremely high highs for the director. I wish there were way more fight sequences in here, because that one really long fight sequence in Buddy's apartment with the dog and everything, that shit was exceptional. It was so hard-hitting, so fast-paced, so well choreographed and shot. I loved it. Now this movie, it is slow. It's very much so a slow burn, but it is, for the most part, I think, rewarding. And it's Michael Fassbender's very cold, steely, calculated performance that sells the whole experience. If they didn't have the right guy in the lead role, this could have been a dud, but they got him, and he definitely did what he does best. He's a masterful actor. He's one of the best working today, and some people often overlook him, but it is a slow movie. There's not a ton of music going on. The story doesn't really offer up anything fresh or exciting or new, but there is still a lot to love here. The Turtles are back, and in my own personal opinion, better than ever, because number 3, getting that bronze medal, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I have always been a big fan of the Turtles, okay? Some of you might not believe me when I say how much I love this movie. There are a lot of people that were quite upset with me when I did my ranking of the TMNT movies for putting Mutant Mayhem in that number 1 spot, but I wish I had the receipts to show you just how often I used to rent VHSs from Blockbuster that had the old cartoon on it. I would rent those things and play them over and over again until the tape was almost run out. So I've always enjoyed the Turtles, and I truly do think this is the best they have ever been. Beautiful animation, funny jokes, Turtles that are actually played by teenagers this time. Great villains, great characters, great character design. I loved the spins they took on the story with Master Splinter, and again, just the way that this world is set up. Some people were like, you know, whatever, woke turtles or all this other nonsensical bullshit because, oh, you know, April O'Neil was black and in high school, and because Master Splinter had an afro when he was younger, and because of this and because of that, and blah, blah, blah. That stuff shouldn't bother you because who the hell cares? Anyway, regardless, nevertheless, transition word here, I freaking adore this movie. Not only one of the best comic book movies of this year and the best Turtles movie if you ask me, but one of the best movies of the past year in general, and probably one of my favorite animated movies of the last decade. This one might ruffle a few feathers, but I will say that this was a huge toss-up between 1 and 2. They are oh so close for me, neck and neck, but number 2 is going to be Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Plenty of people see this as not only being the superior sequel, besting Into the Spider-Verse, but arguably the best Spider-Man movie. It's not quite there for me. My only big gripes with this movie is the pacing. This movie does feel a little too long, especially for only being a part 1 where you're not getting a full, complete story. 2.5 hours is a long time to only have half of the story. Some of the pacing is a bit rough. However, I also have to say that when I think back through the movie, I don't know what could have been cut out. Either way though, the animation is even more stunning and captivating than it was the first time around. A just simply marvelous blend of colors, different ideas, and just there's so much uniqueness inherent in the animation. The voice work is top notch, some of the best in the biz. And I love their approach to the multiverse, and I mean, if you want cameos and Spider fan service galore, this movie is jam-packed with it, on top of its deep cutting emotional beats, personal moments that are going to tug on the heartstrings, and an ending that will have you begging for more. But number 1 has got to be Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Simply put, I laughed, I cried, I cheered. This movie had it all. Not only was it the perfect, and I do emphasize time and time again, perfect ending to the Guardians trilogy, but I don't care if I ever see any of these characters ever again, because where all of their arcs left off, I could not have possibly been more satisfied. I was already looking forward to this one. This one not only blew every expectation I had out of the water, and I left the theater so satisfied, so fulfilled, but it also made me go back and appreciate the little moments from the first Guardians movie and even the second Guardians movie, which has continued to grow on me as well and has grown even more since Guardians 3. There are so many just little connections. James Gunn, he's so meticulously crafted all of these characters. He knew the story he wanted to tell from 1 to 3, and he delivered tenfold, 100 times over. I loved Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and it is not by a large margin, but it is my favorite comic book movie of 2023. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my ranking. While you're at it, don't forget to let me know how you would have ranked all 11 of 2023's comic book movies. If you're a movie lover whatsoever, then my channel is the place to be for you, be it rankings like this one, top 10 videos, tier videos, versus videos, I have it all, and so much more, with plenty going on behind the scenes that will be revealed oh so soon. Not to mention, there are over 1,000 videos currently on the channel for you to enjoy, and nerdy news wrap-up shorts coming almost daily. So if you enjoyed this particular video, then be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if any of that sounds like it's right for you and you want to see more from me, then smash that subscribe button right now. While you're at it, don't forget to ring that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe. Thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.